The sky threatened rain as Ethan Walker hurried down the cracked sidewalk, clutching his worn leather portfolio to his chest. His only decent button-up shirt clung uncomfortably to his back in the humid morning air, and he silently prayed the gathering storm clouds would hold their downpour until after his interview. He couldn't afford to show up looking like a drowned rat. This opportunity at Meridian Technologies was too important. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Ethan fished it out, glancing at the screen to see his roommate Marcus's name. "Hey, I'm kind. I've in a rush," Ethan answered, picking up his pace. "Just calling to wish you good luck, man," Marcus replied. "This is the one, I can feel it." Ethan smiled despite his nerves. "I hope so. The rent's not going to pay itself." "You've got this. Your resume is solid, and you know your stuff better than anyone I know. Just don't do that thing where you talk too fast when you're nervous." "Thanks for the vote of confidence," Ethan said, rolling his eyes even though Marcus couldn't see him. "I should go. Don't want to be late. Knock 'em dead." Ethan ended the call and shoved the phone back into his pocket. Marcus meant well, but his reminder about the rent only added to the pressure. 3 months of rejections had drained Ethan's savings to almost nothing. The small inheritance from his grandmother, money he'd been saving for his dream of starting his own software company, was now being siphoned away for basic survival. At 26, Ethan had thought he'd be further along by now. With a computer science degree from a state university and 4 years of decent work experience, he should have been established in his career. Instead, a round of tech industry layoffs had left him struggling to find steady work beyond the occasional freelance gig. This interview at Meridian was the first promising lead he'd had in weeks. He checked his watch. 45 minutes until the interview. The bus stop was just ahead, and according to his research, the ride to the Meridian Technologies office would take about 30 minutes. He'd have just enough time to arrive, compose himself, and hopefully make a good impression. The universe, however, had other plans. As Ethan approached the bus stop, the heavens finally opened. Fat raindrops began to fall, slowly at first, then in sheets that quickly soaked through his thin shirt. He cursed under his breath and quickened his pace, ducking under the small shelter of the bus stop. 2 elderly women already occupied the bench, leaving Ethan to stand at the edge of the shelter, still partially exposed to the rain. He checked. The bus schedule posted on the wall. According to the timetable, the next bus should arrive in 5 minutes. He glanced down the road, hoping to see it approaching, but there was no sign of it yet. The rain intensified, hammering against the plastic roof of the shelter. Ethan shifted his weight from one foot to the other, trying to ignore the squishing sensation in his now soaked dress shoes. He'd spent hours polishing them the night before, determined to look professional despite their worn condition. So much. And for that effort, his thoughts were interrupted by the sound of screeching tires. Ethan looked up to see a sleek, silver car swerve sharply on the wet road about 100 yards ahead. The vehicle skidded sideways before coming to an abrupt halt, half on the shoulder and half in a shallow ditch. For a moment, Ethan hesitated. The bus could arrive any minute, and he couldn't afford to miss it. But when he saw no movement from the car, concern overrode his self-preservation instincts. He tucked his portfolio under his arm, pulled his jacket over his head, and dashed into the downpour. By the time he reached the car, rain was cascading down his face, blurring his vision. The vehicle was a high-end model, something Ethan could never afford. Through the driver's side window, he could make out a woman slumped against the steering wheel. "Hey!" he shouted, knocking on the window. "Are you okay?" The woman stirred, lifting her head slightly. Ethan tried the door handle and found it unlocked. He pulled it open, immediately hit by the smell of expensive leather and a subtle floral perfume. "Don't move," he said, crouching down to eye level. "You might be hurt." The woman turned toward him, revealing a face that momentarily stunned him. Despite a small cut on her forehead that was trickling blood, she was strikingly beautiful. Dark hair pulled back in a now messy bun, high cheekbones, and eyes the color of amber. She was probably around his age, maybe a few years older, dressed in a tailored blazer and silk blouse that screamed money. "What happened?" she asked, her voice slightly dazed. "You skidded off the road," Ethan explained, scanning her for other visible injuries. "The rain made the road slick. Are you hurt anywhere else?" She gingerly touched the cut on her forehead, wincing. "I don't think so. Just a bit shaken up." "You might have a concussion. We should call an ambulance." "No," she said firmly, suddenly more alert. "No ambulance. I have an important meeting." "I can't miss." Ethan frowned. "You've been in an accident. You need to get checked out." "It's just a scratch," she insisted, reaching for her purse on the passenger seat. She pulled out a compact mirror and examined the cut, then rummaged through her bag for a tissue. "Really, I'm fine." Ethan remained unconvinced, but he recognized the determination in her voice. It was the same tone he used when insisting to Marcus that he was fine despite skipping meals to save money. "At least let me help you get your car back on the road," he offered, looking at the front wheels partially sunken into the muddy ditch. For the first time, she seemed to really look at him, taking in his soaked clothes and dripping hair. "You're already drenched," she observed, a hint of guilt crossing her features. "I can call my roadside assistance." "That could take a while in this weather," Ethan said, glancing back toward the bus stop. He could no longer see if the bus had arrived. "Look, I can try to push while you steer. The ditch isn't that deep, and the car doesn't seem damaged." She hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, thank you." Ethan set his portfolio on the back seat, hoping it would stay somewhat dry, then positioned himself behind the car. The woman rolled down her window to hear his instructions. "Put it in reverse," he called out. "Give it a little gas when I say go, but not too much or you'll spray mud everywhere." She nodded, and Ethan braced himself against the trunk, his dress shoes sliding in the mud as he prepared to push. The rain continued to pound down on him, plastering his shirt to his skin. "Ready, go!" The wheels spun briefly before finding purchase. Ethan pushed with all his strength, his feet slipping in the mud. For a moment, nothing happened, and he feared the car was too stuck. Then, gradually, it began to move. The tires caught solid ground, and with a final heave, Ethan helped guide the vehicle back onto the shoulder of the road. Breathing hard, he wiped mud and rain from his face as the woman stepped out of the car, holding an umbrella she'd retrieved from the back seat. "Thank you," she said, extending the umbrella to cover him as well, though it was a futile gesture at this point. "You didn't have to do that." Ethan shrugged, suddenly conscious of his appearance. Soaked clothes, mud-splattered pants, and what was surely a disheveled mess of brown hair plastered to his forehead. Next to her composed elegance, despite the accident, he felt like a drowned stray. "Couldn't just leave you there," he said, attempting to wipe some of the mud from his hands onto his already ruined pants. She studied him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "Were you waiting for the bus?" she asked, nodding toward the distant shelter. Ethan glanced in that direction just in time to see his bus pulling away. His heart sank. "Yeah, there goes my ride." "I can give you a lift," she offered immediately. "It's the least I can do." Ethan hesitated. The next bus wouldn't arrive for another 20 minutes, which would make him late for the interview. But getting into a luxury car while covered in mud seemed like a terrible idea. "I don't want to mess up your car," he said. "I'm pretty much a walking mud puddle right now." She waved away his concern. "It's just a car. Where are you headed?" "Meridian Technologies," he answered. "I have a job interview at 10. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. But it disappeared so quickly that Ethan wasn't sure he'd seen it at all. "Meridian, I know where that is," she said, her tone casual. "Get in, I can have you there in 20 minutes. Ethan glanced at his watch. If she was right, he'd still make it on time, muddy appearance notwithstanding. He didn't have much choice. "If you're sure," he said, retrieving his portfolio from her back seat. "I'm sure. Consider it payment for your gallant rescue." There was a hint of amusement in her voice that Ethan couldn't quite interpret. He climbed into the passenger seat, immediately aware of the stark contrast between his sodden, muddy state and the immaculate interior of the car. He held his portfolio on his lap, trying to contain his mess to as small an area as possible. "I'm Ethan, by the way," he said as she started the engine. "Olivia," she replied simply, not offering a last name as she pulled carefully back onto the road. As they drove, Ethan became increasingly aware of his predicament. Even if he made it to the interview on time, he looked like he'd been through a war zone. His one good shirt was ruined, his pants were mud-stained, and his shoes would never recover. The chances of impressing anyone at Meridian looking like this were slim to none. "There are tissues in the glove compartment," Olivia said, noticing his attempt to clean some of the mud from his hands with his already soaked handkerchief. "Thanks," he mumbled, taking a few tissues and doing his best to make himself somewhat presentable. It was a losing battle. "So what position are you interviewing for?" she asked, eyes on the road as she navigated through the downpour. "Junior software developer," Ethan replied, trying to keep the desperation out of his voice. "I was laid off 3 months ago when Nexus Tech downsized their development team. Been freelancing since then, but I need something more stable." Olivia nodded thoughtfully. "Meridian's a good company. Competitive, though." "You know people who work there?" A small smile played at the corner of her mouth. "You could say that." Ethan was about to ask for clarification when she made a sharp turn, pulling into a small shopping center. "What are we doing?" he asked, confused. "Making a quick stop," she said, parking in front of a men's clothing store. "Wait here." Before Ethan could protest, she was out of the car, hurrying through the rain under her umbrella. Through the window, he watched her enter the store, speaking animatedly to a salesperson who immediately snapped to attention at whatever she was saying. Ethan sat in bewildered silence, wondering what she was doing and why she was helping him. 10 minutes later, she emerged with a large shopping bag, quickly sliding back into the driver's seat. "Here," she said, handing him the bag. "There's a bathroom in the back of the store. Go change." Ethan peered inside the bag to find a complete outfit. Dress shirt, tie, pants, and even socks. All high-quality brands he could never afford. "I can't accept this," he said, stunned. "This is too much." "You missed your bus helping me," she countered. "Consider it a thank you and a business investment. No one should miss an opportunity." Because of bad luck and good deeds, Ethan wanted to refuse, his pride battling with practicality, but looking at his mud-caked clothes, he knew he had no real choice if he wanted any chance at this job. "I'll pay you back," he said firmly. Olivia's expression softened. "We'll see. Now hurry, your interview is in 30 minutes. Ethan emerged from the store's bathroom, feeling like an imposter. The charcoal suit fit surprisingly well, almost as if Olivia had guessed his measurements with uncanny accuracy. The deep blue tie brought out his eyes, and the leather shoes gleamed with newness. He caught a glimpse of himself in a full-length mirror and barely recognized the man staring back at him. "Much better," Olivia commented when he returned to the car, her eyes scanning him approvingly. "Now you look the part." Ethan shifted uncomfortably, still processing the whirlwind of events. "I don't know how to thank you." "Don't thank me yet," she replied, checking her watch. "We still need to get you to that interview on time." She pulled back onto the road with practiced precision, maneuvering through traffic with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where the gaps would be before they appeared. The rain had lessened to a drizzle, and weak sunlight was beginning to break through the clouds. "So," Olivia said, after a moment of silence, "tell me about your qualifications." "For Meridian?" Ethan asked, surprised by her interest. "Consider it interview practice." Something about her tone made him wonder if there was more to her question, but he pushed the thought aside. If she wanted to help him prepare, he wouldn't. "Refuse. I've been coding since I was 14, he began, falling into the rhythm of his rehearsed pitch. Started with basic web development, then moved into more complex systems during college. My degree's in computer science, but my real passion is creating intuitive user interfaces that solve actual problems." "And what problem would you solve?" "If you could build anything," she asked, catching him off guard. It wasn't a standard interview question. Most companies wanted to know about his experience with their tech stack or how he'd handled challenges in previous roles. They rarely asked about his dreams. Honestly, he hesitated, then decided he had nothing to lose. "I've been working on a platform that bridges the gap between small local businesses and digital marketplaces. Most mom-and-pop shops can't compete with big online retailers, but they offer things the giants can't. Personalized service, unique products, community connection. My system would level the playing field." Olivia's eyebrows raised slightly. "Ambitious. Too ambitious, probably," Ethan admitted. "But I believe in it. Or I did, before rent and food became more pressing concerns. Dreams get pushed aside when survival takes priority," she said, her voice carrying a weight that suggested personal experience. For the first time, Ethan wondered about her story. Despite her obvious wealth, something in her tone hinted at struggles he couldn't see. "What about you?" he asked. "What do you do?" She smiled enigmatically. "I solve problems." Before he could ask for clarification, she pulled up to the sleek glass building that housed Meridian Technologies. The company logo, a stylized compass rose, gleamed on the facade, and employees in business attire streamed through the revolving doors. "We're here," she announced, "with 10 minutes to spare." Ethan gathered his portfolio, heart racing with a mixture of nervousness and excitement. "I don't know how to repay you for all this," he said, gesturing to his new clothes and the ride. "Get the job," she replied simply. "That will be payment enough." He nodded, reaching for the door handle, then paused. "Will I see you again?" "To return the clothes, at least." Olivia considered him for a moment. "I have a feeling our paths might cross again, Ethan Walker." It wasn't until he was halfway to the building entrance that he realized he'd never told her his last name. The lobby of Meridian Technologies was a testament to modern minimalist design, all clean lines, open space, and strategic lighting. A receptionist with perfect posture sat behind a curved white desk, her smile professional as Ethan approached. "Good morning," he said, trying to project confidence despite his lingering confusion over the morning's events. "I'm Ethan Walker. I have an interview at 10 a.m. with Mr. Douglas from the development team." The receptionist tapped at her keyboard, then looked up with a slightly puzzled expression. "Actually, Mr. Walker, there's been a change of plans. You've been redirected to interview with Ms. Chen instead." "Ms. Chen?" Ethan repeated, his stomach tightening. Last-minute changes rarely boded well. "Yes, 15th floor. Her assistant will meet you at the elevator." Ethan thanked her and made his way to the bank of elevators, his mind racing. Who was Ms. Chen? Was she part of the development team, or was this interview being downgraded to a different position? The thought of leaving empty-handed after all Olivia had done to get him here on time made his chest tighten. The elevator rose smoothly to the 15th floor, where a young man in a tailored suit was waiting. "Mr. Walker?" he asked, extending his hand. "I'm Jason, Ms. Chen's assistant. Please follow me." Ethan was led through a series of corridors, each more opulent than the last. The walls displayed modern art pieces that probably cost more than his. Annual rent. Finally, they reached a set of double doors at the end of the hallway. "Wait here," Jason instructed, slipping inside. Ethan stood alone in the corridor, trying to control his breathing. This was definitely not the standard interview setup for a junior developer position. Something was off, but he couldn't put his finger on what. The doors opened, and Jason reappeared. "Ms. Chen will see you now." Heart pounding, Ethan stepped into a spacious corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. A large desk dominated one end of the room, and behind it sat a familiar figure, Olivia. She smiled at his shock, rising from her chair with the same grace she'd shown earlier, though now she'd cleaned the small cut on her forehead and fixed her appearance to flawless perfection. "Hello again, Mr. Walker," she said, her voice carrying a different authority in this setting. "I'm Olivia Chen, CEO of Meridian Technologies. Please have a seat. We have much to discuss." Ethan stood frozen, his mind struggling to process the revelation. The woman he'd pulled from a ditch less than 2 hours ago, the woman he'd pushed through mud in his best clothes, was Olivia Chen, the CEO of Meridian Technologies. "You might want to close your mouth," Olivia said, amusement dancing in her eyes. "Please, sit down." Mechanically, Ethan lowered himself into the chair across from her desk, his portfolio clutched tightly in his hands. The pieces were falling into place. Her knowledge of the company, the mysterious smile when he mentioned Meridian, the way the store clerk had jumped to attention at her request. "You knew," he said finally. "The whole time, you knew who I was and where I was going." "Not initially," she corrected, leaning back in her chair. "I genuinely did have an accident, and you genuinely did help me. But yes, once you mentioned your interview at Meridian, I knew exactly who you were." "How?" The question came out sharper than he intended. If Olivia took offense at his tone, she didn't show it. "Your resume crossed my desk yesterday. We have a special development initiative I'm personally overseeing, and I review all the candidates myself. But I applied for a junior developer position," Ethan said, confusion evident in his voice. "Why would the CEO be involved in hiring at that level?" Olivia folded her hands on the desk. "Because this isn't about filling a standard position, Mr. Walker. It's about finding the right person for a very specific project." She pressed a button on her desk phone. "Jason, bring in the small sphere file, please." While they waited, Olivia studied him with the same intensity she'd shown in the car. Ethan fought the urge to squirm under her gaze. As he stood to leave, a question nagged at him. "Ms. Chen, if I hadn't helped you this morning, if I'd just stayed at the bus stop, would I still have been interviewed by you?" "No," she answered without hesitation. "You would have met with Mr. Douglas as planned. It would have been a standard interview for a standard position. And would I have gotten the job?" Olivia considered him thoughtfully. "Perhaps. Your qualifications are solid, but you wouldn't have been considered for the small sphere project. That requires someone special." The word hung in the air between them. Special. Not more skilled or more experienced, but special. Ethan wasn't sure what to make of that. "I'll be in touch within the week," Olivia said, extending her hand. "Regardless of the outcome, it was a pleasure meeting you, Ethan Walker." Her handshake was firm, her skin warm against his. For a brief moment, Ethan felt a connection that transcended their professional interaction, a recognition between two people who saw the world in similar ways, despite their different circumstances. Then the moment passed, and he was being escorted from her office by the efficient Jason, who led him through a different set of corridors to a smaller meeting room. "Ms. Chen asked me to provide you with some materials about the company," Jason explained, handing Ethan a sleek folder with the Meridian logo, "and to arrange for your transportation home." "That's not necessary," Ethan began, but Jason was already making a call. "The car will be waiting downstairs in 15 minutes, he informed Ethan after hanging up. "Is there anything else you need while you wait?" Ethan shook his head, still trying to process everything that had happened. "No, thank you, I'm fine." Left alone in the meeting room, he opened the folder. Inside was the standard company information, benefits packages, corporate structure, mission statement, but also a sealed envelope with his name handwritten on the front. His fingers trembled slightly as he opened it. Inside was a personal note from Olivia. "Mr. Walker," it read, "regardless of our professional future, I want to thank you personally for your assistance this morning. The clothes are yours to keep. Consider them compensation for the interview. Outfit that was sacrificed to mud on my behalf. I look forward to our next conversation. O.C." Ethan read the note twice, trying to decipher what lay between the carefully chosen words. Was this just professional courtesy, or something more? And why did he care so much about the distinction? 3 days passed with no word from Meridian Technologies. Ethan alternated between hope and despair, checking his phone obsessively for missed calls or emails. By the 4th day, he'd convinced himself that the entire experience had been some elaborate corporate mind game. Perhaps Olivia Chen was known for her unconventional interview techniques that ultimately led nowhere. "You're wearing a hole in the carpet," Marcus commented, as Ethan paced their small apartment living room. "Just call them if you're so anxious." "And say what?" Ethan countered. "Hello, I met your CEO in a ditch and she maybe offered me a job." "Could you confirm?" Marcus shrugged, returning his attention to his laptop. "Sounds better than driving yourself crazy." Ethan was saved from responding by the buzz of his phone. An unknown number. His heart leaped to his throat as he answered. "Mr. Walker, this is Jason Park from Meridian Technologies. Ms. Chen would like to meet with you tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Is that convenient for you?" "Yes," Ethan said, perhaps too quickly. "Yes, that works fine." "Excellent. A car will pick you up at 8:30. And Mr. Walker, Ms. Chen mentioned you should bring any personal project files related to your platform concept." After hanging up, Ethan relayed the conversation to Marcus, who whistled low. "A car? Personal chauffeur service? Either you're getting the job of the century, or they're planning to steal your intellectual property and dump your body in the river." "Thanks for the vote of confidence," Ethan muttered, but Marcus's words planted a seed of doubt. Why would Olivia want his personal project files? The concept wasn't patented, he couldn't afford the legal fees, and she'd already admitted Meridian had a similar project in development. He spent the evening organizing his files, debating how much to share. In the end, he decided on transparency. If Meridian wanted to steal his idea, they had enough already to do so, and his instincts told him Olivia Chen wasn't the type to resort to theft when she could simply acquire what she wanted legitimately. The tea. Next morning, a Blacktown car arrived precisely at 8:30. The driver, a middle-aged man with a neat grey beard, greeted him by name. "Good morning, Mr. Walker. My name is Gerald. Ms. Chen sent me to collect you." The drive to Meridian was smooth and quick, with Gerald maintaining a respectful silence that allowed Ethan to gather his thoughts. This time, instead of the main entrance, they pulled up to a private parking garage beneath the building. "Ms. Chen thought you might prefer a more direct route to her office," Gerald explained, leading him to a private elevator that required keycard access. The elevator opened directly into a different area than Ethan had seen before. A spacious, open-concept floor with glass-walled offices along the perimeter and collaborative workspaces in the center. Unlike the formal, almost sterile environment of the executive floor, this space hummed with creative energy. Developers huddled around monitors. Animated discussions took place on comfortable couches, and whiteboards covered with diagrams lined the walls. "This is our innovation lab," came Olivia's voice from behind him. "What do you think?" Ethan turned to find her watching him with interest. Today, she wore a simple black dress with minimal jewelry, elegant but pragmatic, as if designed to bridge the gap between executive authority and hands-on leadership. "It's incredible," he said honestly. "The whole setup encourages collaboration." "That's the idea. Follow me." She led him to a conference room with glass walls that could be frosted for privacy with the touch of a button. Once inside, she activated the privacy feature and gestured for him to sit. "I've reviewed your interview notes extensively," she began without preamble, "and consulted with our development team. We want to offer you a position, Mr. Walker." Relief flooded through him, followed immediately by caution. "What position exactly?" "Project lead for Small Sphere, the local business platform we discussed. You'd have a team of 6 developers reporting to you, with direct access to me for major decisions." Ethan blinked in surprise. "Project lead? That's several levels above the position I applied for." "The position you're qualified for," Olivia corrected. "Your experience at Nexus was underutilized. Their loss, our gain." "And the salary?" he asked, bracing himself. Olivia slid a document across the table. Ethan scanned the compensation package and nearly choked. The base salary was triple what he'd been making at Nexus, with stock options, comprehensive benefits, and a signing bonus that would immediately solve all his financial problems. "This is generous," he managed. "It's market." "Great for the position," Olivia replied matter-of-factly, "though there are conditions." There it was, the catch he'd been waiting for. "What conditions?" "First, an accelerated timeline. We want to launch a beta version within 6 months. Second, you'll need to work closely with our marketing and business development teams to identify initial partners for the platform. And third," she paused, studying him carefully, "you'll report directly to me, not through the standard management chain." That last condition raised a flag in Ethan's mind. "Is that normal procedure here?" "No," she admitted. "But this project is a personal priority. I want to be involved every step of the way." Ethan considered her words, reading between the lines. This arrangement would put him in frequent contact with the CEO, an unusual position that could be either an incredible opportunity or a precarious tightrope. And there was still the question of why she was so interested in him specifically. "Can I ask you something candidly, Ms. Chen?" "Olivia, please." "And yes, why me? There must be hundreds of developers with more experience, better credentials. What made you choose the guy who pushed your car out of a ditch?" She was quiet for a moment, her amber eyes thoughtful. "Do you know how I started Meridian, Ethan?" The abrupt change of subject caught him off guard. "I read something about tech innovations in supply chain management." "That's the official story," she said with a faint smile. "The reality is messier. 10 years ago, I was a junior developer with a concept similar to yours, a platform to help small businesses compete with larger corporations. I took it to my employer, certain they'd see its potential. Instead, they patented aspects of my work, shelved the project, and laid me off during the next restructuring." Ethan's eyes widened. "So, when I told you about my platform, I saw myself," she confirmed. "But more importantly, I saw someone with both the technical vision and the personal integrity to build something that helps people, not just generates profit. Your qualifications got you the interview, Ethan. Your character got you this offer." Her sincerity was palpable, and something inside Ethan relaxed. This wasn't a trap or a game. It was recognition. Perhaps for the first time in his professional life, someone saw his full potential. "When would you want me to start?" he asked. Olivia's smile was immediate and genuine. "How about right now? I can give you a tour of the team and workspace, and you can start meeting the people you'll be working with." As they stood to leave, Ethan realized he was stepping into something much bigger than a new job. This was a turning point, a moment where his life's trajectory was fundamentally changing. "One more thing," he said, remembering the folder of personal project files he'd brought. "You wanted to see these." Olivia glanced at the folder, then shook her head. "Keep them. Those are your original concepts, your intellectual property. What we build together will incorporate your vision, but will be something new. I don't want to take what's yours. I want to help you create something better." The sentiment struck Ethan deeply. In an industry known for cutthroat competition and idea theft, her respect for his work was unexpected and profound. "Thank you," he said simply. "Don't thank me yet," she replied with a hint of challenge in her voice. "Thank me when we've built something extraordinary." The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity as Ethan settled into his new role at Meridian. His team, a diverse group of developers with complementary specialties, was talented but initially wary of their new leader, who had seemingly appeared out of nowhere with the CEO's explicit backing. "Don't take it personally," advised Wei, a senior developer who had become Ethan's closest ally on the team. "Everyone's just trying to figure out if you're Olivia's spy or her latest pet project." They were sharing a late dinner in the office, surrounded by whiteboards covered in flowcharts and user interface mock-ups. Midnight oil was a regular occurrence as they raced to meet the ambitious timeline Olivia had set. "I'm neither," Ethan said, frowning as he picked at his takeout. "I'm just a developer who happened to be in the right place at the right time." Wei snorted. "Nothing happens by chance with Olivia Chen. She's 10 steps ahead of everyone else. Trust me, she saw something in you beyond your coding skills." Ethan couldn't deny that his relationship with Olivia was unusual. True to her word, she was deeply involved in the project, attending weekly progress meetings and often dropping by the innovation lab unannounced. She challenged his ideas, pushed back on timelines, and occasionally overruled his decisions, but always with clear reasoning and respect for his position. What he hadn't expected was how much he would come to admire her. Beneath the polished exterior of the successful CEO was a brilliant technical mind and a genuine passion for innovation that matched his own. Their debates over implementation, details, or user experience considerations were the intellectual highlights of his week. "You're staring at the same line of code for 10 minutes, Wei observed, interrupting Ethan's thoughts. "Either you've found a critical bug, or your mind is elsewhere." Ethan rubbed his eyes. "Just tired. We should call it a night." But as they packed up, Wei paused. "A word of advice. Be careful." "About what?" "Olivia. The lines between professional and personal get blurry when you work this closely with someone you admire." Wei's expression was knowing. "Especially someone like her." "It's not like that," Ethan protested, perhaps too quickly. Wei simply shrugged. "If you say so." The conversation lingered in Ethan's mind as he rode the company shuttle home. Was there something more to his fascination with Olivia Chen? He respected her professionally, certainly, admired her accomplishments and intellect, found her challenging and occasionally infuriating. But Wei seemed to be implying something beyond that, something Ethan wasn't ready to examine too closely. The following Monday brought a new complication. As Ethan arrived at the office, Jason intercepted him before he could reach the innovation. "Lab, change of plans this morning," the assistant informed him. "Miss Chen wants you to join her for the Techworth meeting." Ethan frowned. "Techworth? The venture capital firm?" "The very one. They're interested in providing additional funding for SmallSphere, and Ms. Chen thinks having the project lead present would strengthen the pitch." 30 minutes later, Ethan found himself in Meridian's most imposing conference room, seated beside Olivia as they faced 3 representatives from Techworth Ventures. The men in expensive suits projected an air of casual superiority that immediately set Ethan on edge. "Ms. Chen," began the oldest of the 3, a silver-haired man with piercing blue eyes, "we've reviewed the materials you sent over. The concept is intriguing, but we have concerns about the market viability." Olivia nodded calmly. "That's why I've asked Ethan Walker, our project lead, to join us. He can address the technical aspects and user adoption strategy." All eyes turned to Ethan, who straightened in his chair, grateful for the suit Olivia had insisted he wear today. Drawing on his preparation and passion for the project, he launched into an overview of SmallSphere's unique features and market positioning. "The key differentiator," he explained, pulling up slides on the room's display, "is our hyperlocal focus combined with enterprise-level tools." Small businesses get the technological advantages of major chains while maintaining their unique identity and community connections. The middle investor, younger, with a permanently skeptical expression, leaned forward. That sounds nice, but Amazon and other major platforms already allow small sellers. What makes you think they won't simply copy your model and crush you with their existing infrastructure? It was a valid concern, one that had kept Ethan awake many nights. Before he could respond, Olivia stepped in. "That's precisely why the timeline is so aggressive," she said smoothly. "We're not just building a platform, we're building relationships with business associations in 50 key markets. By the time larger players notice what we're doing, we'll have established ecosystem partnerships that can't be easily replicated." The investors exchanged glances, clearly impressed by the strategy but not yet convinced. The youngest of the three, who had remained silent until now, fixed his gaze on Ethan. "And you developed this concept?" he asked, his tone suggesting he found it hard to believe. Ethan felt a flash of indignation, but kept his expression neutral. "The original concept was mine, yes. But what we're building now is the result of collaboration between my team and Ms. Chen's strategic vision." "Interesting," the man replied, making a note. "And what was your previous role before becoming a project lead at Meridian?" The slight emphasis wasn't lost on Ethan. The question was really, how did someone like you end up in a position like this? "I was a senior developer at Nexus Technologies," Ethan answered evenly. "Before that, I worked at several startups focused on user experience design." The older investor nodded, seemingly satisfied, but the younger one persisted. "And yet, Ms. Chen has placed you in charge of what could be Meridian's most important initiative in years. That's quite a vote of confidence." Ethan felt Olivia tense beside him, though her expression remained impassive. He realized with sudden clarity that these men weren't just questioning his qualifications, they were indirectly questioning her judgment. "Mr. Reeves," Ethan said, addressing the younger investor directly, "in tech, the best ideas rarely come from the most predictable places. Ms. Chen recognized the potential in both the concept and my ability to execute it. That's what visionary leadership looks like, seeing value where others might not think to look." A moment of silence followed his words. Then, surprisingly, the older investor chuckled. "Well said, Mr. Walker." He turned to Olivia. "He's got spirit, I'll give him that. Let's talk numbers." The meeting proceeded more smoothly after that, with discussions of investment tranches and performance metrics. Throughout it all, Ethan was acutely aware of Olivia beside him, her confident responses, strategic deflections, and occasional glances his way that seemed to contain silent approval. When the investors finally departed, promising a formal response, within the week, Olivia closed the conference room door and leaned against it with a sigh. "That went better than expected," she said. "Did it?" Ethan asked, gathering his materials. "I felt like I was being interrogated rather than consulted." "You were," she confirmed. "Reeves in particular was testing you, and by extension, testing my decision to put you in charge. You handled it perfectly." The praise warmed him more than it should have. "I just told the truth." The truth delivered with conviction is a powerful thing. She checked her watch. "I need to head to another meeting. Dinner tonight? We should discuss next steps based on their feedback." "Dinner?" Ethan repeated, caught off guard by the casual invitation. "Yes, dinner. That meal people typically eat in the evening." Her eyes held a hint of amusement. "Unless you have other plans?" No plans," he assured her quickly. "Dinner sounds good." Only after she left did Ethan realize that Wei's warning about blurring lines might be more relevant than he'd thought. Was this a business dinner or something else? And why did the distinction matter so much to him? The restaurant Olivia chose was nestled in the historic district of the city, an intimate space with brick walls, warm lighting, and a jazz trio playing softly in the corner. It wasn't flashy or pretentious, but the maitre d' greeted Olivia by name and led them to a secluded table without delay. "You seem surprised," Olivia commented as they were seated. "I expected something more." Ethan gestured vaguely. "Corporate? Ostentatious?" She smiled. "I save those places for investors and board members. This is where I come when I actually want to enjoy my meal." The observation was telling. For all her wealth and status, Olivia seemed to compartmentalize her life, keeping separate spaces for herself, away from the expectations of her position. For some reason, she'd chosen to include Ethan in that more authentic sphere. They ordered drinks, a glass of red wine for Olivia and a craft beer for Ethan, and fell into an easy conversation about the project. The Techworth meeting had raised important questions about their market entry strategy, and they debated approaches while sharing appetizers. "Your idea about partnering with local business associations is solid," Ethan acknowledged. "But we need to be careful not to spread ourselves too thin initially. 50 markets is ambitious for a beta launch." 20 then, Olivia counted. "Concentrated in regions with diverse business ecosystems. We can expand once we've proven the model." As their main courses arrived, the conversation shifted from business to more personal territory. Olivia asked about Ethan's background, his childhood in a small manufacturing town, his early interest in computers, the scholarship that had allowed him to attend university. "And your family? Are they still in your hometown?" she asked. Ethan's expression tightened slightly. "My mother passed away my senior year of college. Cancer. My father. We're not in touch." Olivia's eyes softened with genuine sympathy. "I'm sorry about your mother." "Thank you. She was the one who always believed in me, worked extra shifts to help with expenses even when I had the scholarship." He took a sip of his beer, pushing away the familiar ache. "What about you? Your family must be proud of what you've built." A shadow crossed Olivia's face. "My relationship with my family is complicated." "Complicated how?" She seemed to weigh how much to share. "My father is Richard Chen of Chen Global Investments." The name instantly registered. Richard Chen was a legendary figure in the business world, known for his ruthless investment strategies and vast fortune. "You're that Chen," Ethan said, understanding dawning. "I never made the connection." "By design," Olivia replied. "I don't use my family name professionally. Everything I've built on my own terms." "Against your father's wishes. Against his expectations." She traced the rim of her wine glass. "He wanted me to join the family business. Follow the path he'd laid out. When I chose tech instead of finance, he made it clear I was on my own." The revelation cast Olivia in a new light. Like him, she had forged her own way, rejected the expected path. And like him, she'd had to do it under the shadow of a powerful name. "Is that why you took a chance on me?" Ethan asked. "Because you know what it's like to start from scratch?" Olivia considered him thoughtfully. "Partly, but mostly because you remind me of what matters in this industry. Solving real problems for real people. It's easy to lose sight of that amid quarterly reports and investor demands." As dinner progressed into dessert, they found themselves sharing stories from their careers. Ethan's early failures, Olivia's challenges breaking into the male-dominated tech leadership circle. The formal distance between CEO and employee had dissolved, replaced by the rapport of two people who understood each other's journeys. "The first time I pitched Meridian to investors," Olivia confessed, laughing, "one of them asked if my boss would be joining us later. He couldn't fathom that I was the founder." "What did you do?" Ethan asked, grinning, thanked him for his time and walked out. 3 months later, when we landed our first major client, he called to reconsider. I told him the investment opportunity was no longer available. "Brutal," Ethan said admiringly. Necessary, she corrected. Some lessons people only learn the hard way. The check arrived, which Olivia insisted on paying, despite Ethan's protest. As they waited for her card to be processed, a momentary silence fell between them. "This was nice," she said, meeting his eyes directly. "Thank you for joining me." "Thank you for inviting me," he replied, suddenly aware of how the candlelight softened her features, highlighting the warmth that her professional demeanor often concealed. Outside the restaurant, her driver waited with the car. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of approaching autumn. "Can I drop you somewhere?" Olivia offered. Ethan hesitated. The evening had already crossed several boundaries between professional and personal. Driving him home would blur those lines further. "I'll grab a rideshare," he said. "But thank you," she nodded, accepting his decision without question. Then, surprising him, she stepped forward and kissed his cheek lightly. "Good night, Ethan. I'll see you tomorrow." Before he could respond, she was in her car, leaving him standing on the sidewalk with the lingering warmth of her lips on his skin and a growing confusion in his heart. The next morning, Ethan arrived at work early, hoping to collect his thoughts before facing Olivia again. To his relief, Jason informed him that she would be in meetings off-site most of the day. "She left this for you, though," the assistant added, handing Ethan a sealed envelope. Inside was a brief note. "Techworth approved the funding. Full details in your email. Let's accelerate the development timeline." Oh, the message was all business, as if their dinner had never happened. Had he misread the situation entirely? Was the kiss simply a European-style farewell from someone who moved in more cosmopolitan circles than he did? "You look troubled," Wei commented, dropping into the chair beside Ethan's desk. "Bad news?" "Good news, actually. We got the Techworth funding." "Then why the frown?" Ethan hesitated, then decided to confide in his colleague. "Olivia and I had dinner last night to discuss the project." Wei's eyebrows shot up. "Dinner? Like in a restaurant? Just the two of you?" "Is that unusual?" "Ethan," Wei said slowly, as if explaining something to a child, "Olivia Chen doesn't do dinner with employees. Strategy sessions in her office with takeout, sure. Team celebrations at company events occasionally, but a private dinner, that's unheard of." Ethan absorbed this information, unsure whether it clarified or complicated his situation. It was just business, he insisted, though the kiss on his cheek suggested otherwise. "If you say so," Wei replied, clearly unconvinced. "Just be careful. Office relationships are complicated enough without adding a power differential the size of the Grand Canyon." "There's no relationship," Ethan said firmly. "We're colleagues with a shared vision for an important project." We'd looked like he wanted to say more, but was interrupted by a notification on Ethan's computer. An email from Olivia with the subject line, "Small Sphere Executive Presentation." "I need you to prepare a comprehensive overview of the project for the executive team," the email read. "This is our opportunity to secure internal resources beyond the Techworth funding. The presentation is scheduled for Monday morning. We should meet Sunday to review your slides. My place would be most convenient. Address details attached." Olivia, Ethan stared at the screen, aware of Wei reading over his shoulder. "Just colleagues, huh?" Wei muttered. "Keep telling yourself that." Olivia's place turned out to be a stunning penthouse apartment in the city's most exclusive high-rise. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the skyline and the river beyond. The space was beautifully designed with a minimalist aesthetic. Clean lines, neutral colors, and strategic pops of vibrant artwork that Ethan suspected were original pieces from significant artists. "Make yourself comfortable," Olivia said, gesturing toward the living area as she took his coat. She was dressed casually in jeans and a simple cashmere sweater, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail, a striking contrast to her polished office appearance. Ethan set up his laptop on the glass. dining table, spreading out his notes and presentation materials. He'd spent the entire weekend refining the presentation, determined to keep things strictly professional despite the intimate setting. The confusion following their dinner and that brief kiss on the cheek had left him off balance, unsure of where. They stood. "Coffee or something stronger?" Olivia offered, moving toward the kitchen. "Coffee's fine, thanks." As she prepared their drinks, Ethan tried not to stare at her domestic movements. The practiced way she operated the high-end espresso machine, the subtle grace as she reached for mugs from a cabinet. This was a side of Olivia Chen that few people at Meridian ever saw, the human being behind the CEO title. "So," she said, placing a steaming mug in front of him, "show me what you've put together." For the next hour, they worked through his presentation, slide by slide. Olivia was thorough but fair, questioning his assumptions and offering suggestions to strengthen key points. The tension Ethan had felt upon arrival gradually dissolved into the familiar rhythm of their professional collaboration. "The technical architecture section needs more detail for the CTO," Olivia noted, making a mark on her copy of the slides. "But don't get too deep into the weeds. The CFO's eyes will glaze over. I can create an appendix with the technical specifics," Ethan suggested. "Reference it during the presentation, but keep the main slides higher level." "Perfect," she agreed, looking up at him with approval. Their eyes held for a moment longer than necessary, and Ethan felt a now familiar flutter in his chest. He quickly refocused on the laptop screen. About the market adoption timeline, he said, pulling up the next slide, "I think we need to address potential resistance from traditional businesses more explicitly." Olivia nodded, but her attention seemed to have shifted. She set down her pen and leaned back in her chair, studying him with an unreadable expression. "Can I ask you something, Ethan?" "Of course." "Are you uncomfortable being here?" The directness of the question caught him off guard. "No, not uncomfortable exactly, but," she prompted. Ethan hesitated, weighing his words carefully. "I'm just trying to understand what we're doing. Professionally, everything is clear. You're my boss. We're building something important together. But then there are moments like the other night at the restaurant, and now this." He gestured to the intimate setting of her home. "It feels like more than just work." Olivia was quiet for a long moment, her expression thoughtful. Would it be a problem if it were more than just work? The question hung in the air between them, laden with implications. Ethan's heart raced. "It could complicate things," he said finally. "For the project, for the team." "That's not what I asked," she replied softly. Before Ethan could formulate a response, his phone buzzed with an incoming call. He glanced at the screen, an unknown number, and was about to ignore it when Olivia nodded for him to take it. "Hello?" he answered, stepping away from the table. "Is this Ethan Walker?" came a gruff, unfamiliar voice. "Yes. Who's this?" "Richard Chen. I believe you work for my daughter." Ethan froze, catching Olivia's questioning look from across the room. "Mr. Chen, yes, I'd like to meet with you," the man interrupted. "Tomorrow morning, 7 a.m., my office at Chen Global. Do you know where that is?" "I can find it," Ethan replied, struggling to keep his voice neutral. "Good. Don't tell Olivia about this conversation. I'll explain everything tomorrow." The call ended as abruptly as it had begun. Ethan stared at his phone, mind racing. How had Richard Chen even gotten his number, and what could he possibly want to discuss? "Everything okay?" Olivia asked when he returned to the table. "Fine," Ethan lied. "Just a spam call." The deception felt wrong, but Richard's instruction had been clear. Until Ethan understood what was happening, he thought it best to comply. Besides, his relationship with Olivia, whatever it was becoming, was complicated enough without dragging family dynamics into it. They returned to the presentation, but the easy flow of their earlier collaboration had vanished. Ethan's mind kept returning to the phone call, and he caught himself making careless errors that Olivia patiently corrected. By 9 o'clock, they had finalized the presentation, and Ethan began gathering his materials. "Thank you for coming over," Olivia said, walking him to the door. "I know it's not conventional, but I find it easier to think clearly away from the office sometimes." "I understand," Ethan replied, though in truth he understood less now than when he'd arrived. At the door, they faced each other awkwardly. The question Olivia had posed, whether it would be a problem if their relationship were more than professional, remained unanswered between them. "About what you asked earlier," Ethan began. Olivia shook her head. "Not now. Let's get through the executive presentation first. We both need clear heads for that." She was right, of course. The presentation could determine the future of the project. Their shared vision, personal complications, would only distract from that goal. "Good night, Olivia," he said, stepping into the hallway. "And good night, Ethan," she replied, her expression inscrutable as she closed the door. The next morning found Ethan standing in the imposing lobby of the Chen Global headquarters, a gleaming tower of steel and glass that practically screamed old money and power. Unlike Meridian's modern creative atmosphere, Chen Global exuded traditional corporate authority. Dark woods, marble floors, and portraits of stern-faced men who had built the company's fortune over generations. "Mr. Walker," a severe-looking executive assistant approached him. "Mr. Chen is ready for you." Ethan was led through a series of increasingly opulent corridors until they reached a massive oak door. The assistant knocked once, then ushered him inside. Richard Chen's office was exactly what Ethan had expected, expansive, tastefully decorated with antiques and artifacts that subtly communicated vast wealth and global connections. The man himself sat behind a desk that could have comfortably served as a dining table for 8, his silver hair immaculately styled, his bespoke suit without a wrinkle. "Mr. Walker," he said, not rising, "thank you for coming." "You didn't give me much choice," Ethan replied, immediately regretting his confrontational tone. To his surprise, Richard chuckled. "Direct. Good. I despise unnecessary pleasantries." He gestured to a chair across from his desk, and Ethan sat, keenly aware of the power dynamic. This was Richard's territory, and they both knew it. "I'll be equally direct," Richard continued. "I want to know your intentions regarding my daughter." Ethan blinked, caught off guard by the personal nature of the question. "My intentions, Mr. Chen, Olivia is my boss. We have a professional relationship." Richard's expression made it clear he didn't believe this for a second. "Olivia doesn't invite employees to her home. She doesn't take them to Antonio's for private dinners. And she certainly doesn't look at them the way she looks at you." The realization that Richard had been having him followed was unsettling, but Ethan refused to be intimidated. "With all due respect, sir, if you have concerns about Olivia's personal life, shouldn't you be discussing them with her?" "My daughter stopped listening to me years ago," Richard replied, a hint of regret coloring his tone. "But that doesn't mean I've stopped watching out for her interests." "Her interests," Ethan echoed, feeling a flare of indignation. "Or your interests, Mr. Chen?" Richard's eyes narrowed slightly, assessing Ethan with new consideration. "You think I disapprove of you because of your background, your lack of pedigree or family connections?" "The thought had crossed my mind," Ethan admitted. "Then you've misjudged me," Richard said, rising from his chair to walk toward the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the financial district. "I built Chen Global from nothing. My father was a factory worker who immigrated with $10 in his pocket. I know the value of hunger, of having something to prove." The revelation caught Ethan by surprise. Public profiles of Richard Chen typically emphasized his business acumen and current wealth, not his humble origins. "Then what is this about?" Ethan asked. Richard turned back to face him, hands clasped. Behind his back, "It's about Meridian. about the company my daughter has built and what it means to her. I would never do anything to harm Meridian, Ethan said firmly. Not intentionally, perhaps. Richard returned to his desk, opening a folder that Ethan hadn't noticed before. But romantic entanglements between executives and their subordinates rarely end well for either party or for the companies they lead. He slid several documents across the desk. Ethan glanced down to see news articles about corporate scandals, CEO resignations, and plummeting stock prices, all stemming from workplace relationships gone wrong. Olivia has worked too hard to risk Meridian's reputation on an office romance, Richard continued. The board would question her judgment. Investors would lose confidence. Everything she's built could crumble. Ethan felt a cold weight settling in his stomach. Though he distrusted Richard's motives, the man's words contained an uncomfortable truth. A relationship between him and Olivia would create complications neither of them needed, especially with the small sphere project at such a crucial juncture. What exactly do you want from me, Mr. Chen? Richard studied him for a moment. I want to offer you an opportunity. Chen Global has a venture capital division that specializes in tech startups. I'm prepared to fund your own company, your original. A vision for the local business platform, independent of Meridian. Ethan stared at him in disbelief. You want me to leave Meridian, to abandon the project? I want you to pursue your dream on your own terms, Richard corrected smoothly. With substantial financial backing and complete creative control. No board meetings, no investor presentations. Just you building what you've always wanted to build. The offer was tempting, more than tempting. It was everything Ethan had dreamed of before he'd met Olivia. His own company, his vision, with the resources to make it reality. But the timing and conditions made Richard's true intentions transparent. In exchange for walking away from Olivia, Ethan said flatly. Richard didn't deny it. Consider it a business decision, one that benefits everyone involved. You get your company, Olivia preserves her professional reputation, and Meridian continues to thrive. And what about small sphere? Meridian has talented developers. They'll find someone else to lead the project. Ethan shook his head, anger building. This isn't about protecting Olivia or Meridian. This is about control. You couldn't dictate her career choice, so now you're trying to control her personal life. Richard's expression hardened. You don't know my daughter as well as you think you do, Mr. Walker. Olivia doesn't allow herself to need people, not since her mother died. Whatever she feels for you now, eventually she'll choose Meridian over any relationship. That's who she is. The personal detail about Olivia's mother caught Ethan off guard. She had never mentioned her mother's death, though it explained the absence of any maternal references in their conversations. I think that's for Olivia to decide, Ethan said, standing. Not you, and certainly not me. So you're declining my offer? I'm declining to be manipulated, Ethan clarified. If Olivia and I decide to pursue something beyond a professional relationship, that's our business. And if we decide to keep things strictly professional for the sake of the project, that's also our decision. Richard's lips curved in what might have been respect. You have integrity, Mr. Walker. I can see why my daughter is drawn to you. He closed the folder and leaned back in his chair. But integrity won't protect either of you from the consequences of poor judgment. Is that a threat? It's a reality. Check, Richard replied. The offer remains open should you reconsider. My assistant will see you out. As if on cue, the office door opened and the stern-faced assistant appeared. The meeting was clearly over. Ethan hesitated, then decided on one parting shot. Mr. Chen, has it occurred to you that your interference might push Olivia closer to me rather than away? Something flickered across Richard's face, uncertainty perhaps, or reluctant acknowledgement, but he merely nodded to his assistant, dismissing Ethan without another word. The executive presentation was scheduled for 10 a.m. Ethan arrived at Meridian an hour early, his mind still churning from the encounter with Richard Chen. The ethical dilemma was clear. Should he tell Olivia about the meeting? Richard's warning, to keep it secret, felt manipulative, but revealing it could create unnecessary complications before a critical presentation. In the end, the decision was made for him. As he entered the innovation lab to make final preparations, he found Olivia already there, pacing with barely contained fury. "My father called you," she said the moment she saw him. It wasn't a question. Ethan sighed. "How did you know?" "Because I know him," she replied, her voice tight with anger, "and because his assistant called this morning to accidentally let me know about your meeting." Ethan winced. "I should have told you last night. I'm sorry." "What did he want?" "To protect you, or at least that's what he claims." Olivia's bitter laugh held no humor. "Richard Chen doesn't protect people. He controls them." She stopped pacing to face Ethan directly. "What did he offer you?" "Funding for my own company. Complete independence. Everything I would need to build my platform without Meridian." Her expression faltered, a flash of vulnerability crossing her features before she regained composure. "That's a generous offer. Will you take it?" The question caught him off guard. "Do you think I would?" "I think my father is very good at finding people's price," she said carefully. "Everyone has one." "And what's yours?" Ethan countered. "If he offered you something you truly wanted in exchange for, say, never seeing me again, would you take it?" The hypothetical hung between them, more revealing than either had intended. Olivia's gaze was unflinching, but Ethan could see the internal calculation happening behind her eyes. "I don't know," she admitted finally, "and that terrifies me." The honesty in her response knocked down the last of Ethan's hesitation. He stepped closer, closing the careful distance they'd maintained. "I told him no," he said softly, "not because I don't want my own company someday, but because I won't be used as a pawn in whatever game he's playing with you." Relief flickered across Olivia's face, followed quickly by determination. "He won't stop, you know. This was just his opening move. Then we'll handle whatever comes next. Together." Ethan reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers. "But right now, we have an executive presentation to nail." Olivia glanced at their joined hands, then up at his face, a smile slowly replacing her frown. "Yes, we do." The moment was interrupted by the arrival of Wei and the rest of the team, carrying coffee and final presentation materials. Ethan and Olivia stepped apart, but something fundamental had shifted between them, an unspoken alliance against external pressures. The executive presentation went flawlessly. Ethan delivered the technical overview with confidence, while Olivia handled the strategic and financial projections. The chemistry between them was evident, each anticipating the other's points and building a compelling case for Small Sphere's potential. When the last executive filed out of the boardroom, offering congratulations and support for the project's next phase, Olivia turned to Ethan with undisguised triumph. "We did it," she said, eyes bright with excitement. "Full funding and resource allocation. We can accelerate the timeline even further." The team erupted in cheers, high-fiving and already discussing implementation details for the newly approved features. In the midst of the celebration, Jason appeared at Olivia's side, whispering something in her ear that made her expression darken. "If you'll excuse me," she said to the group, "I need to handle something. Ethan, continue the briefing without me." She left quickly, Jason following in her wake. Ethan fought the urge to go after her, focusing instead on the team's questions and enthusiasm. Whatever was happening, Olivia would tell him when she was ready. It was nearly 2 hours later when Ethan's phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. "My office, now." He found her standing at the window, staring out at the cityscape. Her posture was rigid, her reflection in the glass showing an expression he hadn't seen before, a mixture of anger and resignation. "What happened?" he asked, closing the door. Behind him, the board received an anonymous tip about our inappropriate relationship, she said without turning, along with concerns about my judgment in appointing a relatively inexperienced developer to lead a multi-million-dollar project. Ethan didn't need to ask who was behind the leak. "Your father, almost certainly, though we'll never prove it." Now she turned to face him, her professional mask firmly in place. "The board has called an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning." "What does that mean for the project? For us?" "It means," Olivia said carefully, "that we need to make some difficult decisions, very quickly." The silence in Olivia's office was charged with unspoken implications. Ethan watched her pace the length of the room, her mind clearly racing through scenarios and contingencies. This was the Olivia he'd first glimpsed during their initial encounter, strategic, calculating, several moves ahead on a chessboard only she could fully see. "We have three options," she said finally, stopping to face him. "1, we deny everything and proceed as planned. 2, we acknowledge a personal connection but assure the board it won't affect business decisions. Or 3, she hesitated. "What's the 3? Ethan pressed. "I remove you from the project." The words landed like a physical blow. After everything they'd built together, the idea of being separated from Small Sphere felt like having a limb amputated. "That's not an option," he said firmly. "It's the cleanest solution from the board's perspective," Olivia countered, her tone deliberately neutral. "You'd still be well compensated, of course. We could find another role for you within Meridian. Or I could take your father's offer and disappear completely," Ethan finished for her, unable to keep the bitterness from his voice. "Is that what you want?" "What I want doesn't matter," she snapped, the careful composure cracking. "This is about what's necessary to protect the company and the project." "The project is just code and concepts, Olivia. It can be rebuilt. But this thing between us," he gestured between them, struggling to define what had barely begun. "Don't tell me you're willing to sacrifice that without a fight." She pressed her fingers to her temples, closing her eyes briefly. "You don't understand the position I'm in. The board has been looking for any excuse to exert more control over my leadership. Several members have connections to my father's business circles. If they lose confidence in me, everything I've built could unravel." Ethan saw it clearly then, the trap Richard Chen had laid. By exposing their potential relationship, he'd forced Olivia into exactly the dilemma he'd predicted. Choose between her heart and her company. Richard knew his daughter well enough to gamble on which she would prioritize. "So we're back to where we started," Ethan said quietly. "Your father pulling the strings." The observation hit a nerve. Olivia's expression hardened. "This is not about my father. This is about making rational business decisions in a crisis." "A crisis he manufactured. Don't you see? He's manipulating you just like he's trying to manipulate me." "And what exactly did he offer you, Ethan?" Her tone was dangerous now. "You never specified the details." Ethan hesitated, sensing the conversation veering into treacherous territory. "Full funding for my own company, autonomy to build the platform my way, in exchange for walking away from you, from Meridian." Olivia nodded as if confirming a suspicion. "And you turned him down out of what? Principle? Or were you holding out for a better offer from me?" The accusation stung all the more for its unexpectedness. "Is that what you think? That I'm playing some angle here?" "I think everyone wants something, Ethan. My father taught me that much, at least." The sudden distance between them was palpable. Somewhere in the conversation, they had shifted from allies against Richard's interference to adversaries guarding their own vulnerabilities. "What I want," Ethan said carefully, "is to finish what we started. Not just small sphere, but whatever is happening between us. I want the chance to see where it leads without your father's manipulation or corporate politics getting in the way. Olivia's expression softened slightly, but her response was interrupted by a knock at the door. Jason entered without waiting for permission, his face grave. "I've just received word," he said to Olivia. "The board meeting has been moved up. They're convening in 30 minutes. Olivia's posture straightened, the CEO mask sliding back into place. "Thank you, Jason. Please prepare the conference room and notify my legal team." When they were alone again, she turned to Ethan with resolute determination. "I need to handle this my way, alone." "Olivia, no," she cut him off. "This isn't a negotiation. Return to the innovation lab and continue work as normal. I'll deal with the board." The dismissal was clear. Ethan wanted to argue, to insist on standing beside her, but he recognized the steel in her voice. This was her battle to fight, on terrain she knew better than he did. "For what it's worth," he said as he reached the door, "I didn't turn down your father's offer because of principles or a better angle. I turned it down because some things matter more than money or success." He left without waiting for her response, his emotions a tangled mess of frustration, concern, and a deepening attachment to a woman who might be about to sever their connection. Entirely, back in the innovation lab, Ethan found it impossible to focus. Wei and the team were buzzing with excitement following the successful executive presentation, unaware of the corporate drama unfolding on the top floor. "Hey, where's the fire?" Wei asked, noticing Ethan's distracted pacing. "We should be celebrating. The execs loved the presentation." "Something's come up," Ethan said vaguely. "Board issues." Wei's expression grew serious. "What kind of issues?" Before Ethan could decide how much to share, his phone chimed with a meeting invitation. "Small sphere strategic reorganization. Immediate attendance required." The participants list included the entire development team, Olivia, and several board members. "I guess we're about to find out," Ethan said, showing Wei the notification. The conference room was already filled with tense energy when the development team arrived. Olivia sat at the head of the table, flanked by 2 board members. Ethan recognized from previous meetings. Her expression revealed nothing as she nodded for everyone to take their seats. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," she began, her voice steady and professional. "In light of recent developments and feedback from the board, we've decided to implement some strategic changes to the small sphere project structure." Ethan's stomach tightened. This was it. She was going to remove him from the project, just as she'd suggested in her office. "Effective immediately," Olivia continued. Small Sphere will be established as a separate subsidiary of Meridian Technologies. This will allow for more focused development, dedicated resources, and strategic partnerships without the constraints of Meridian's existing business model. Murmurs of surprise rippled through the room. This wasn't at all what Ethan had expected. "As CEO of Meridian," Olivia went on, "I will remain involved in high-level strategic decisions. However, the new subsidiary requires dedicated leadership." Her eyes found Ethan's across the table. "Ethan Walker will serve as CEO of Small Sphere Inc., with complete operational autonomy and direct reporting to the subsidiary's board, which I will chair." The announcement left Ethan momentarily speechless. CEO of a Meridian subsidiary. It was a solution he hadn't considered, one that separated them professionally while preserving their connection to the project and potentially to each other. Additionally, Olivia added, "To demonstrate our commitment to this new venture, Meridian will be matching the recent TechWorth investment, effectively doubling the available capital for development and market entry." One of the board members, an older woman with shrewd eyes, spoke up. "Ms. Chen has presented a compelling case for this restructuring, which the board has approved conditionally. Mr. Walker, we expect you to justify this considerable investment, with rapid progress and clear results." "I understand," Ethan replied, still processing the implications of Olivia's announcement. And I'm grateful for the opportunity. The meeting continued with discussions of logistics, timelines, and resource allocation. Throughout it all, Ethan tried to catch Olivia's eye, to silently communicate his questions and gratitude, but she remained focused on the business at hand, deftly answering board members' concerns and outlining next steps with practiced precision. When the meeting finally adjourned, Olivia was immediately surrounded by board members with follow-up questions. Ethan led his team, now his employees, back to the innovation lab, fielding their excited questions about what this meant for the project and their roles. It was nearly evening before Ethan's phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. Roof garden. In 10 minutes, he found her standing at the edge of Meridian's rooftop garden, a green oasis 15 stories above the city streets. The setting sun painted the skyline in hues of gold and amber, a dramatic backdrop that suited the magnitude of the day's events. "So," he said, joining her at the railing, "I'm a CEO now." A small smile played at the corner of her lips. "It would appear so. This wasn't one of the 3 options you presented earlier. I came up with a 4th. Ethan studied her profile, admiring the intelligence and adaptability that had allowed her to outmaneuver not only the board, but her father as well. "The subsidiary structure removes the ethical conflicts," she explained. "You'll have your own board, your own reporting structure, no direct professional subordination to me." "And us?" he dared to ask. "What does this mean for whatever this is between us?" Olivia turned to face him fully, her expression more open than he'd ever seen it. "It means we have a chance to find out what this could be, without professional complications, if that's still what you want." In answer, Ethan closed the distance. Between them, his hands gently framing her face as he kissed her, not the hesitant brush of lips, but a definitive statement of intent. She responded with equal certainty, her arms winding around his neck as she melted against him. When they finally broke apart, breathless and slightly dazed, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "Your father won't be happy about this solution." "My father hasn't been happy about my choices since I was 16, she replied with a soft laugh. "But for once, I'm not making decisions based on defying him or proving myself. I'm choosing what I want." "And what do you want, Olivia Chen?" Her eyes met his, clear and certain. "This, you, a chance to build something that matters, both professionally and personally." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the rooftop garden, Ethan pulled her close again, marveling at how a chance encounter on a rainy morning had led to this moment. From pushing a stranger's car out of a ditch to becoming CEO of a promising startup, his life had transformed in ways he could never have imagined. "For the record," he murmured against her hair, "I would have fixed your car, even if I'd known you were a ruthless CEO who was about to turn my life upside down." Olivia laughed, the sound unburdened by the weight of expectations or corporate personas. "And I would have hired you even if you hadn't been the perfect gentleman who ruined his only interview suit to help me." "Quite the coincidence," Ethan mused. "Or fate," Olivia suggested, surprising him with the uncharacteristic sentimentality. The city lights began to twinkle in the gathering darkness. Ethan held her close, content in the knowledge that sometimes the most unexpected detours lead exactly where you're meant to be, 3 months into Smallsphere's existence as a separate entity. The transformation was remarkable. What had begun as a concept in Ethan's mind, refined through collaboration with Olivia, had blossomed into a fully operational platform with a growing list of small business clients. The company had moved into its own office space, a converted warehouse with exposed brick walls, open workspaces, and a culture distinctly different from Meridian's corporate environment. Ethan had taken to his role as CEO with surprising ease. The technical aspects came naturally to him, of course, but the leadership responsibilities, setting vision, managing people, making difficult decisions, had revealed strengths he hadn't known he possessed. He'd expanded the team, bringing on specialists in user experience, marketing, and business development while maintaining the core engineering group from Meridian. Wei had joined as Chief Technology Officer, providing both technical expertise and a grounding perspective when Ethan's ambitions occasionally outpaced practical realities. The client onboarding process still has friction points, Wei pointed out during their weekly strategy meeting. Small business owners are getting stuck on the digital inventory integration step. Ethan nodded, making notes on his tablet. Let's simplify it further, maybe a tiered approach. Basic listing first, with optional advanced features they can add later. I'll have the UX team mock up some options by Friday, Wei agreed. As the meeting concluded and the team dispersed, Wei lingered behind. So, he said with a knowing smile, dinner with the chair of the board tonight? Ethan tried to maintain a professional expression but failed. Is it that obvious? You've checked your watch 6 times in the last hour, and you're wearing the tie she gave you for your birthday. Wei shrugged. Doesn't take a genius. The relationship between Ethan and Olivia had evolved cautiously but steadily since the formation of Small Sphere. They were both intensely private people, careful to maintain professionalism in business contexts, while gradually allowing themselves to explore the personal connection that had sparked from their first meeting. It's our 3-month anniversary, Ethan admitted. Of Small Sphere, I mean. Right, Wei drawled. The company anniversary. Definitely what you're celebrating. Ethan laughed, accepting the gentle teasing. Get back to work before I exercise my CEO authority and assign you to the help desk. The restaurant Ethan had chosen for their dinner was a small Italian place tucked away on a quiet side street, family-owned for 3 generations and exactly the type of business Small Sphere was designed to help. The owner, Marco, greeted him warmly. Mr. Walker, your table is ready, the best in the house. Thanks, Marco. And please, it's Ethan. Of course. And Ms. Chen is joining you. She should be here soon. Marco winked conspiratorially. I have prepared something special, as you requested. Ethan was shown to a secluded table near the back, partially screened by a trellis, covered in climbing vines and tiny white lights that created the illusion of dining beneath stars. It was intimate without being overtly romantic, a balance he still found himself navigating carefully with Olivia. He checked his phone. No messages. Unusual for Olivia, who was typically punctual to a fault. As he was about to call her, the restaurant door opened, and she appeared, scanning the room until she spotted him. Even after 3 months of dating, the sight of her still caused his heart to skip. But as she approached, Ethan noticed something was off. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes, and there was tension in her shoulders that hadn't been there that morning when they'd spoken briefly by phone. Sorry I'm late, she said, kissing his cheek before taking her seat. Board calls ran long. Everything okay? He asked, immediately concerned. Olivia hesitated, an internal debate visible in her expression before she responded. Not entirely, but it can wait until after dinner. Tonight's supposed to be a celebration, Olivia. He reached across the table to take her hand. Tell me what's happening. She sighed, relenting. Richard made his move. He's orchestrated a challenge to my leadership at Meridian. What? Ethan straightened, anger flaring instantly. How? He's been quietly acquiring Meridian stock through shell companies. Not enough for a controlling interest, but enough to sway some of the more nervous board members. He's calling for a vote of no confidence, citing the impulsive decision to spin off Small Sphere as evidence of questionable judgment. The implications were clear. Richard Chen was still determined to exert control over his daughter's life, and he was willing to threaten her company to do it. "That's ridiculous," Ethan said. "Small Sphere is already showing strong metrics. The separate subsidiary structure was strategically sound." "You and I know that," Olivia replied, "but several board members have long-standing business relationships. With my father, they're susceptible to his influence." The waiter appeared with wine, and they paused their conversation while he poured. Once they were alone again, Ethan leaned forward. "What can I do? How can I help?" The gratitude in Olivia's eyes was tinged with resignation. "That's just it, Ethan. There might not be anything either of us can do. Richard has been planning this for months, positioning his pieces carefully." "There's always a solution," Ethan insisted, his mind already racing through possibilities. "What does he actually want? Is this really about Meridian, or is it about us?" Olivia traced the rim of her wine glass, considering the question. "Both, I think. He's never approved of my career choices. Creating Meridian instead of joining Chen Global was the ultimate rejection of his plans for me. But our relationship, that's personal for him. It represents a further deviation from his vision of my life. So he's punishing you by threatening what you've built." "Classic Richard Chen strategy," she confirmed with a bitter smile. "Apply pressure to the point of greatest vulnerability." Ethan absorbed this, feeling a complex mixture of anger toward Richard and protectiveness toward Olivia. But beneath those emotions was a growing determination. If Richard Chen thought he could manipulate them so easily, he had underestimated both Ethan's resourcefulness and Olivia's resilience. "When is the vote?" he asked. 2 weeks. Annual shareholder meeting." "Then we have time to prepare a counteroffensive." Olivia studied him with a combination of affection and skepticism. "This isn't code, Ethan. You can't just debug the problem and push a fix." "No, but I can apply the same principles. Identify the vulnerability, develop a solution, test and deploy." He squeezed her hand. "We'll figure this out together." For the first time since she'd arrived, genuine warmth replaced the tension in Olivia's expression. "You know, 3 months ago I would have insisted on handling this alone. Compartmentalizing personal and professional challenges was my specialty. And now I find I'm rather fond of the word together." The simple admission meant more than any grand declaration. For Olivia Chen, allowing someone to stand beside her during a crisis represented a profound shift in how she navigated her world. They managed to enjoy their dinner despite the looming threat, discussing potential strategies between bites of Marco's exceptional pasta. By the time dessert arrived, a special tiramisu the chef had prepared with a commemorative small sphere design in cocoa powder, they had outlined the beginnings of a plan. "The key is the shareholder presentation," Ethan said, savoring the last bite of dessert. "If we can demonstrate Small Sphere's value definitively, it undermines Richard's entire argument." "We'd need more than projections," Olivia pointed out. "We'd need concrete results, client testimonials, revenue growth, evidence that can't be dismissed as optimistic forecasting." "Then that's what we'll deliver," Ethan said with confidence. "We've been focusing on onboarding the right mix of businesses. What if we accelerate the process for our most promising clients, create showcase examples that highlight exactly what Small Sphere can do?" Olivia considered this, her strategic mind visibly working through the implications. "It's aggressive, but it might work. We'd need to select businesses that demonstrate significant growth after joining the platform, ideally in different sectors, showing versatility." As they continued refining the idea, Ethan marveled at how seamlessly they worked together, even under pressure. Their different perspectives and skill sets complemented each other in ways that made both of them more effective. When they finally left the restaurant, the night air was cool and clear. They walked slowly toward Olivia's car, hands intertwined, The weight of Richard's threat temporarily held at bay by the strength of their connection and the beginnings of a counterplan. "Stay with me tonight," Olivia said softly as they reached her car. It wasn't a question exactly, but there was an unusual vulnerability in her voice that caught Ethan's attention. "Of course," he replied, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "But are you sure you're okay? You seem afraid of losing everything I care about?" She attempted a smile that didn't quite succeed. "Maybe I am." The admission was so uncharacteristic of her usual confidence that Ethan pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her in the middle of the quiet street. "That's not going to happen," he promised against her hair. "Whatever your father throws at us, we'll handle it. I'm not going anywhere, Olivia. Anywhere." She leaned into him, accepting the comfort he offered. Another small but significant shift for someone who had spent most of her life believing she needed to stand alone to remain strong. Later, as they lay together in the darkness of Olivia's bedroom, the city lights creating patterns on the ceiling through partially drawn curtains, Ethan found himself thinking about the strange trajectory that had brought them to this point. From a chance roadside encounter to battling one of the most powerful businessmen in the country for the future of two companies and their relationship. "What are you thinking about?" Olivia asked, her head resting on his chest. "How different my life would be if I hadn't missed that bus," he replied honestly. "If I hadn't stopped to help you." She traced patterns on his skin, her touch both casual and intimate. "Do you ever regret it? Getting involved in all of this, with me?" "Not for a second," he said without hesitation. "Even with your father trying to destroy us both, I'd make the same choice every time." Olivia propped herself up to look at him, her expression serious in the dim light. "I need you to know something. Whatever happens with Meridian, with the vote, it doesn't change us. Richard can take a lot of things from me, but not this. Not you." The certainty in her voice filled Ethan with a renewed determination. Richard Chen might have decades of business experience and billions in resources, but he had underestimated one critical factor: the power of the connection he was trying to break. "Get some sleep," Ethan said, pulling her close again. "Tomorrow, we start fighting back." With the shareholder vote approaching, Ethan and Olivia work tirelessly to counter Richard Chen's challenge. Small Sphere accelerates their success metrics while Olivia rallies Meridian shareholders. Just days before the vote, Richard makes a shocking move by acquiring Local Link, Small Sphere's competitor, for $300 million. Initially seen as a threat, Ethan realizes this actually validates their business model and weakens Richard's argument that Small Sphere was a mistake. The day before the vote, Richard unexpectedly visits Ethan with a surprising offer. Rather than competing, he proposes merging Local Link with Small Sphere under Ethan's leadership, with Chen Global's resources behind them. Richard admits the shareholder vote isn't trending in his favor and reluctantly acknowledges Ethan's worth. However, his conditions for Olivia reveal this isn't surrender, but strategic repositioning to maintain some control. Ethan must decide whether this offer is genuine or another chess move. The morning of the shareholder meeting arrived with nervous anticipation. Ethan and Olivia had stayed up most of the night discussing Richard's unexpected offer. "It's a trap," Olivia had insisted. "He never compromises unless it serves a larger strategy." "But what if it's more than that?" Ethan countered. "What if he truly sees the value in what we've built?" In the end, they crafted a counter-proposal that protected both companies while opening the door to collaboration on their terms. As Olivia stood before the shareholders presenting Small Sphere's impressive early results, Richard Chen watched from the back row, his expression unreadable. When the vote concluded overwhelmingly in Olivia's favor, he approached them both. "Congratulations," he said stiffly. "It seems I underestimated you, both of you. We'd like to discuss our response." to your offer," Ethan said. "Not as adversaries, but as potential partners, on equal footing." Richard studied them for a long moment. "Perhaps it's time for a new approach," he conceded finally. 6 months later, the merged technologies of Small Sphere and Local Link had revolutionized how small businesses competed in the digital marketplace. Richard maintained a board seat, but had gradually ceded operational control to the younger generation. On the first anniversary of their chance meeting in the rain, Ethan proposed to Olivia, at the same spot where his broken-down car had once changed both their lives forever. "From roadside strangers to partners in every sense," he said, as she accepted with tears in her eyes. "Some detours are meant to be." If you enjoyed this inspirational journey about how a single act of kindness changed 2 lives forever, please subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming stories that remind us how unexpected moments can transform our destinies. New videos every week.